For 12 days in June 2025, one of the Middle East's longest-running shadow conflicts became an open war. Israel and Iran, rivals for decades, moved from proxy confrontation and covert strikes into direct military exchange. The conflict began on June 13 and ended on June 24, after intense attacks, civilian deaths, damaged nuclear facilities, missile barrages, and direct United States involvement. It was short compared with many wars, but its impact was far larger than its duration. It touched nuclear diplomacy, regional security, international law, and the fragile balance between escalation and restraint. To understand the 12-day war, the key question is not only what happened during those 12 days, but why the confrontation had become so explosive by the time the first strikes landed. The war did not appear out of nowhere. For decades, Iran and Israel had been locked in a proxy conflict across the region. Iran supported what it called the Axis of Resistance, a network of allied groups opposed to Israeli and United States influence. Israel, meanwhile, viewed Iran's regional alliances and missile capabilities as a direct strategic threat. The confrontation was fought through intelligence operations, cyber attacks, assassinations, airstrikes, and the backing of armed groups rather than through declared war. This created a dangerous pattern. Each side tried to weaken the other while avoiding a full-scale direct clash. But the more intense the proxy conflict became, the more difficult it was to keep that boundary intact. At the center of the crisis was Iran's nuclear program. Iran's enrichment capabilities had been disputed internationally for decades, with Israel and its allies arguing that Tehran could use them to develop nuclear weapons. In 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, created a diplomatic framework. Iran accepted limits on its nuclear program, and 6 major powers lifted sanctions in return. But in 2018, U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from the agreement unilaterally. After that, Iran began stockpiling enriched uranium and largely suspended monitoring by the International Atomic Energy Agency. By 2025, the nuclear issue was no longer just a diplomatic dispute. It had become a trigger point for military action. The years before the 12-day war saw direct tensions rise sharply. After the October 7 attacks in 2023, Hamas and Hezbollah entered open conflict with Israel, intensifying the regional environment. In April 2024, Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Damascus, Syria, killing senior Iranian military officials. That strike helped move the confrontation further away from deniable operations and closer to open retaliation. Direct exchanges continued in April and October of 2024, showing that the old rules of the shadow war were breaking down. Then, on the day before Israel launched its June 2025 attack, the IAEA declared Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations in a resolution backed by the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany. On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a surprise attack on Iran. The strikes targeted military and nuclear facilities, while also assassinating prominent military leaders, nuclear scientists, and political figures. According to reports, the operation involved not only airstrikes but also commando units and Mossad operatives inside Iran. Israel damaged or destroyed air defenses, opening paths for further strikes and limiting Iran's ability to respond immediately. The attack was designed to degrade Iran's strategic capabilities quickly, especially around its nuclear infrastructure and military command. But it also killed civilians and struck within a sovereign state, which immediately triggered international alarm and accusations that the operation violated international law. The early Israeli campaign was especially damaging because it targeted people as well as infrastructure. Several Iranian military leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and at least 10 leading nuclear scientists were killed. Removing commanders and technical experts can disrupt decision-making and slow nuclear or military programs, but it can also deepen a country's determination to retaliate. Inside Iran, the government responded with security measures, including internet blackouts. These blackouts limited public communication, made independent reporting more difficult, and reflected fears of internal unrest, espionage, or follow-on attacks. The war was therefore not only fought in the air. It also unfolded through information control, intelligence operations, and attempts to manage public perception. Iran's retaliation was massive. Over the course of the war, Iran launched more than 550 ballistic missiles and more than 1,000 suicide drones. These attacks were aimed at overwhelming defenses and imposing costs on Israel. Some struck civilian population centers, including apartment buildings, while others hit at least 12 military, energy, and government sites. One hospital was also hit. Missile and drone warfare had become a defining feature of modern regional conflict. Drones could be launched in large numbers, while ballistic missiles could travel at high speed and carry destructive payloads. Even when many projectiles are intercepted, enough can get through to create fear, casualties, and political pressure. Israel continued striking inside Iran, including high-rise buildings and apartments, while Iranian missiles struck military and government facilities, residential areas, a research center, and a hospital. The human cost was severe. Iran's total death toll was estimated between 1,060 and 1,190 people. Thousands more were wounded, and tens of thousands were displaced. These figures show how quickly strategic warfare can become civilian suffering. Facilities connected to nuclear programs and air defenses may be military targets, but when they sit near cities or when retaliation reaches population centers, the line between state conflict and civilian trauma collapses. The 12-day war became a reminder that even short wars can produce long-lasting social and humanitarian damage. The United States became directly involved in two major ways. First, it helped intercept Iranian attacks, supporting Israel's defense against missiles and drones. Then, on June 22, U.S. forces bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The strikes hit Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow, facilities central to Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Israeli and U.S. airstrikes damaged these sites extensively. For Washington, the stated logic was tied to preventing nuclear proliferation and pushing Iran toward a nuclear deal. For Iran, the strikes confirmed that the conflict was not only with Israel but also with the United States. This widened the stakes dramatically, because any further escalation could have pulled more bases, allies, and shipping routes into danger. Iran answered the U.S. strikes by firing missiles at an American base in Qatar. That move was significant because it gave Iran a way to respond directly to Washington without necessarily choosing unlimited escalation. Attacking a U.S. base risked a larger war, but not responding at all could have looked like weakness after nuclear facilities were bombed. This is one of the most dangerous dynamics in international crises. Each side searches for a strike that is forceful enough to send a message, but limited enough to avoid catastrophe. During the 12-day war, every attack carried the possibility that the next response would be larger, broader, and harder to control. The nuclear diplomacy surrounding the war deteriorated further after the strikes. Iran suspended cooperation with the IAEA, claiming the agency had passed information about nuclear facilities and scientists to Israel. Whether viewed as a defensive measure or a political accusation, the suspension made international monitoring harder. That mattered because nuclear transparency is one of the few tools available to reduce suspicion. When inspectors lose access, outside governments often assume the worst, and the targeted state may feel even more vulnerable. The result is a feedback loop. Less monitoring creates more fear increases pressure for military action, and military action makes cooperation even less likely. International reaction was sharply divided, though most countries and the United Nations expressed deep concern and called for diplomacy. Many countries, including most Muslim-majority and Arab states, condemned the Israeli strikes. The International Commission of Jurists and some legal scholars described the attacks as a violation of international law. On the other side, Argentina, Germany, Ukraine, and the United States said the strikes were justified as a way to prevent nuclear proliferation and argued that Iran should quickly agree to a nuclear deal. This divide reflected a central tension. some governments prioritized sovereignty and the prohibition on force, while others emphasized the perceived danger of a nuclear-armed Iran. On June 24, after intense pressure from the United States, Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire. The war ended after 12 days, but the underlying conflict did not disappear. Iran's nuclear facilities had been damaged, its military leadership had been hit, and its cooperation with the IAEA had been suspended. Israel had shown its willingness to strike deep inside Iran, while Iran had demonstrated the scale of its missile and drone arsenal. The United States had moved from support and interception to direct bombing. 9 months later, on February 28, 2026, Israel and the United States launched new strikes on Iran, beginning the 2026 Iran War. The 12-day war was therefore not a final chapter, but a major turning point in a continuing regional crisis. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.